The wheat has turned yellow, and the earth is no longer like the earth. It has been inspired, and the spirit has risen all at once. Among ridges and ridges, among villages and villages, among windmills and windmills, among locust trees and locust trees, the continuous wheat farms and the June sunshine compete with each other, and there is dazzling golden light everywhere. The sun is in the sky, but the wheat farms in June are more like the sun, and the thick and dense wheat orns are like thousands of rays of sunlight. The sun is shining, and the earth is bright, magnificent, and brilliant. This is the land of northern Jiangsu. There are no high mountains or deep water. It is flat, endless, and it is unobstructed. There is no wind in the wheat farms, but only heat waves after another. The heat waves are fragrant. This thick, broad fragrance is the call of the earth. It's time to harvest. Yes, the wheat is yellow. It's time to sickle. Farmers looked at the golden earth, opened their mouths, squinted their eyes, and are happy in the heart. After all, it is an exciting scene when the wheat becomes yellow. After a long and at the same time a green and yellow dotted wait, farmers smell the scent of the new wheat, and the wheat orns would naturally grow in their hearts. Regardless of the wheat growing in the ground, they will eventually become baozi, steamed buns, dough balls, or noodles. They will be placed on the dinner table of every household and become farmers' 3 meals a day, and they become the farmers' weddings and funerals. In short, becoming the days of farmers. Days are not just the joys, but also match the sufferings. Speaking of suffering, people often think of an old saying, there are 3 hardships in boiling, ironing, and grinding tofu. In fact, this sentence was not said by farmers, and it doesn't look like so when you think about it. Those who said this must be from the city, and at least to be from the town. They have fully eaten and stood by the counter or under the eaves of the shaving shop, and inevitably said a word or two of toothache. Plainly speaking, toothache words are nonsense. Compared with the wheat harvesting and seedling planting of the farmers, what is bolting, what is ironing, and what is tofu grinding? Wheat is scenting on the farm, but after all, it is on the farm. They cannot jump as high as fleas do and happen to fall on your dinner table. You have to cut them off. You have to pass through your hands, one by one, to cut off the mighty wheat. Farmers hold the wheat in one hand and the sickle in the other. They cut from right to left, one hand, another hand. After you repeat this action a dozen times, you can only move a small step forward. People often praise a person's steadfastness 1 step at a time. For a wheat-cutting farmer, 1 step forward leaves countless footprints. In fact, it doesn't matter. The farmers have enough patience. However, patience alone is useless. The most important thing is that you have to bend your waist. This is dying. You won't be able to straighten your waist in less than a morning. However, this is only the beginning. When you raise your head and look into the distance along the plain of the wheat farms, boundless gold leaps in front of you, and the scorching sunshine burns in front of you. They are calling, and they are still bottomless abysses. This is no labor. This is almost torturing. It takes more than 10 days to suffer. However, you cannot stop this suffering, as you are willing to do so yourself. If you want, your life cannot go on. Farmers can only squint their eyes, open their mouths wide, support their knees with arms, straighten their waists strenuously, take a few breaths, and then bend down. You can't rest. You can't rest for a day, and you can't sleep for a morning's lazy sleep. Every day at 4 or even 3 in the morning, you have to grit your teeth, pick up the scattered body, return to the wheat farms, pick up yesterday's torture instrument, and put it back on yourself. Not that the farmers are cheap, don't know how to empathize, don't know how to cherish themselves. No. The days of farmers have actually long been controlled by heaven, which is time. The Saint Senior Master Meng knew this. Thousands of years ago, he was sitting in a broken ox cart, preaching, "Do not miss the farming time." And that's what he meant. What is farming time? Simply put, it is the relationship between the sun and the earth. Sometimes they are far away and sometimes they are close. When it's near, you can't delay. You can't afford to delay, as the sun doesn't wait for you. If you delay the wheat harvest season, you will delay in planting seedlings. If you delay planting seedlings, you will only have half of your life left. You can't deal with it. Therefore, the lazy farmers are not called lazy, but called ignorance of current affairs. A very heavy sentence. To put it bluntly, it means that they can't live well. It is said that farmers are diligent. Who is diligent? Who the hell wants to be diligent? Who the hell is willing to be diligent? It is all forced by heaven. After all, the days of farmers have been choked off by time. Time is your fate, and time is your luck. To grab the time and harvest the wheat, farmers can't rest for a moment, as they have to plant seedlings at once. Planting seedlings is even more bitter. Your waist must bend deeper. Your body must suffer a greater bitterness. It's almost on the tiger bench. Therefore, once the wheat in the farms turns yellow, farmers are actually very complicated in their heart when looking at the boundless gold. Not only joy, but also fear after all. This kind of fear goes deep into the bones, and at the same time, there is no place to hide. You can only stiffen your neck and head up. Of course, no one puts it on the lips. Farmers can't say 3 hardships in life, bolting, ironing, and grinding tofu, as beautiful words. Even saying is for nothing. The tiger bench is there. You have to walk over by yourself, scrambling to ride it. Is there anyone who is not afraid? Yes, that's some young generation, the so-called stunning green, the so-called newborn calves. Duanfang is one of them. Duanfang came back to Wang village on a busy holiday. In fact, he was still a high school student and was about to graduate. Duanfang went to high school in Zhongbao town for 2 years. He didn't spend too much effort on books, but spent more time on stone chains and stone weights. Duanfang didn't talk a lot and didn't seem to be very active, but in Zhongbao town, he made some friends from the town, all of whom were weight insiders. Duanfang followed them, but he was actually going to the stone chains and stone weights. Although his body was thin and there was no meat, Duanfang was born with an open frame of bones. The key is that his mouth is active, his teeth are strong, and he can swallow 7 or 8 big buns in a meal. In the 2 years of high school, Duanfang has changed. His height jumps up and his size is bigger. He is strong to the earth, a solid and robust male player, and stands with wins. Duanfang returned to Wang village with all his good muscles and all his strength. At the same time, he also brought back beddings, a wooden box, and 2 sickles. Duanfang knows that once the busy vacation is over, the graduation exam will be in a blink. After taking the exam and finishing the graduation certificate, he is a member of Wang village, a formal, strong worker. Duanfang worked desperately in the town for his reason. Duanfang's relationship with his father has never been good, and sometimes they even fight. Duanfang had to prepare his strength and physique first. Maybe he would need it one day. Duanfang's father is not a relative, but his stepfather. Duanfang was dragged by his mother to Wang village as an oil bottle. He was just 14 years old that year. Due to the late growth, Duanfang was thin, wilted, and was basically a seedling. Before that, he was not only absent from Wang village, but also not from Xinhua County. He was fostered by his mother in Dafeng County, Baiju Town, Dongtan village, his grandmother's home. That is actually not Duanfang's home. His home should be in Xitan village in Baiju Town. The bones of his biological father still sleep under the mud in Xitan village. Duanfang was fostered in his grandmother's house. It says that he was raised by his grandmother, but it was his youngest uncle who really raised him. His uncle got married, and although his aunt entered without saying anything, Duanfang hindered their hands and feet after all. His mother, Shen Cuizhen, walked a day's journey from Wang village to Dongtan village, leading Duanfang to kowtow around. Kowtowed to the living first and then to the dead. With a stunning head, Duanfang kowtowed from Dongtan village to Xitan village, and then from Dongtan village to Wang village in Xinhua County. Duanfang had a father when he arrived at Wang village, whose surname was Wang, named Wang Cunliang. Shen Cuizhen led Duanfang to Wang Cunliang, told him to kneel down, and told him to call Dad. Duanfang couldn't do it, kneeling on the ground, not speaking, not getting up. In the end, it was Wang Cunliang's eldest daughter, Hongfen, who put Duanfang from the ground. Hongfen just came back from the farm, put down her hoe, and tied a red checkered scarf on her head, and said to Duanfang, "This is my brother. Get up, get up." Duanfang called someone for the first time in Wang village, not calling Dad or Mom, but calling Hongfen sister. His mother, Shen Cuizhen, listened into her ears, and her heart was filled with disappointment. The stepfather, Wang Cunliang, is actually not a bad man. He is good to Shen Cuizhen and has no unexplainable bad habits. Just one, he has a loud throat and a quick palm. The most terrible thing is that he can't control his hands. Wang Cunliang's most unbearable thing is arguing. If you talk back, his slap will bounce back like your echo. Once Wang Cunliang's slap eventually slapped Shen Cuizhen's face, and Duanfang was burning in the kitchen. He heard a crisp slap from the patio, and he also heard his mother scream. Duanfang walked out, approached his stepfather around, suddenly rushed forward and bit Wang Cunliang's wrist in a bite. Like a turtle, he can't get out of it, no matter how he shook it. Wang Cunliang grabbed Duanfang, looking for a bullwhip everywhere on the patio. Duanfang looked at the opportunity, let go of his mouth, and ran back to the kitchen. He pulled out the fire tongs from the fire, which were red and almost transparent. Duanfang was holding the red tongs and about to poke at his stepfather's ass. Cuizhen yelled, "Duanfang!" loudly. Hoarse. Duanfang stopped his feet. Cuizhen pointed to the well in the patio and said loudly, "Son, you go further, your mom goes down." Duanfang was holding the flame tongs, panting and staring at his stepfather. Wang Cunliang straightened up, put the bleeding wound to his mouth, licked, and went out. Shen Cuizhen saw Duanfang spit on the tongs. The fire tongs made a sound, and the saliva was gone, leaving only a white spot on the fire tongs. Cuizhen walked to Duanfang, trying to slap him, but her nose was suddenly sore. She saw the heart of her son. Duanfang was not brought up by her after all. He has not been around for so many years. A little strange, more or less. Being a mother owes him after all. This is a lump in her heart, which has become a disease. Now it seems that the flesh and blood are the flesh and blood. Even if the bones is broken, they are linked to the nerve in the end. My child is older, and I got helped by my child. Cuizhen looked at her eldest son, tears drifting in her eyes. And suddenly she screamed. Cuizhen grabbed the tongs in Duanfang's hand and said to her son, "You pooped and pushed your courage away, huh?" Duanfang finally has his own home in Wang village, but this home is very special, with quite complicated intricacies. One sister, Hongfen, is the original daughter of the stepfather. Two younger brothers. The eldest brother was Duanzheng, the little oil bottle Zhu with his mother's remarriage. The younger brother, Net, who was born by Cui Zhen after marrying Wang Cunliang. In comparison, Duanfang's situation is a bit isolated. It's pea in the Yangtze River. There is not much with him and not lacking without him. But not long after entering the house, Duanfang saw a bad sign coming. His mother had her taboo, as she is afraid of Hongfen. Hongfen is neat, just like her dead mother. She speaks crisply and does crisply. There is no return to anything she does. Of course, there's no end either. Once going, never ending, pulling both vines and melons. Another characteristic of Hongfen is that her temperament is unsteady, and she does not have a constant mood. Everything is good when she is good, even a little too much, but it's bad suddenly. Once bad, it has incomparable explosiveness and a large area of lethality. As long as her madness comes up, everything hinders her hands and feet, even the four legs of a bench. Seeing this point correctly, the mother's taboo actually became Duanfang's taboo, and Duanfang tried his best not to provoke her. Duanfang was actually not afraid of Hongfen, but for the sake of his mother, Duanfang still let it go and swallowed it. Fortunately, Hongfen treated Duanfang quite well. Her enemy was Shen Cuizhen, not Duanfang. Not worth it. In places with people, Hongfen conversely talks about the good of Duanfang. She just wants others to listen that her Hongfen is not an unreasonable person. The fact is that she couldn't get along with Shen Cuizhen was all because the stepmother is nonsense. Duanfang didn't learn anything when he came to Wang village, but he learned one thing, that is, not to speak. It was not someone else who put a seal on Duanfang's mouth. It was Duanfang's mother. As long as there is an accident at home, Shen Cuizhen's first reaction is to wink Duanfang. Talk less. It's none of your business. Shen Cuizhen did this for Shen Cuizhen's reasons. Duanfang had no father or mother for many years, and finally settled down so that he could no longer be mistreated. It is always good to talk less. Duanfang then does not talk. But the meaning of Duanfang's not talking is different from his mother's. Duanfang did it for his mother. Mother and Hongfen didn't get along. This is obvious. Which daughter can be intimate with her stepmother? If Duanfang talks for his mother too much, explaining to Hongfen would definitely be difficult. If this relationship with Hongfen is not good, only his mother would be bullied in between eventually. However, Duanfang's silence didn't get anything. Wang Cunliang disliked Duanfang's this point very much. For God's sake, Wang Cunliang, the stepfather, has done a good job already, without partiality either, overtly or secretly. But how come you, little thing, don't know good or bad, keep a shady face all day long, and not say anything? Who is it for? Wang Cunliang hated him for this. Your little thing is for your mother, biting me and rushing over with the burning tongues. It's okay. Your kid is tough and bloody, but you can't make none fart even with 3, 6, or 9 sticks. It's like the stepfather is not a man who abused you also. Where is this from? Everything else is far away, not talking about it, just talking about the matter of going to high school the year before last. Wang Cunliang really exhausted his mind. Even his own father might not do better than him. According to Wang Cunliang's meaning, Duanfang was not his own after all. If stopping him from going to junior high, it would be a shame. Now that he graduated junior high school, it's good enough. Even if his ghost dad stands in front of Wang Cunliang could raise his head up high. The mom died when Hongfen was 7. She only went to junior elementary school, which is 3rd grade. It has not been easy for so many years. Her marriage is a matter in about 2 years. Let's not say how many dowries we can give to Hongfen. We have to set up a few wedding tables for her. This can be regarded as an explanation for my daughter and decency for her dead mother. Duanzhong was still studying, and Nat was still studying, and if Duanfang went to high school, relying on the forehands of myself and Cui Zhen, we can't afford it no matter how. But Cui Zhen was stubborn on this issue. She must let Duanfang go. She put dead clovers on the lid of the toilet. As long as Wang Cunliang didn't let go, her mouth would be up against the bottle. She would do it. This woman is good about all. There is nothing to be faulty in or out of the house, but there is one thing. She likes to do things on a dead end, and she will make things to death at every turn as if she was born greater than Liu Hulan and died more gloriously than Liu Hulan. It's really unnecessary. Wang Cunliang's first wife died of illness, and he almost lost half of his life. Marrying the second one, who is actually an ancestor who likes to seek death. Tell me why. Can't let the second one die, he can't. But what about the money? Wang Cunliang could only blacken his face to spank Nat. Nat is his own son. He can. Wang Cunliang pulled him over and slapped vigorously, with a very heavy hand. He just wanted to show it to Shen Cui Zhen in this weird way. But Wang Cunliang ignored one thing. Nat was not only Wang Cunliang's seed, but also Shen Cui Zhen's flesh. Shen Cui Zhen grabbed Nat and held him in her arm, picked up the scissors, and was about to poke her own throat. If it weren't for Wang Cunliang's quick eyes and quick hands, Cui Zhen would have done it. Cunliang yielded, agreed, and let Duanfang go to high school. He couldn't tell, but in his heart he was still afraid of this supplement woman. Then followed her. Wang Cunliang did his good to the end and sent Duanfang to the town by himself. However, Wang Cunliang left the words to Duanfang. He said to Duanfang on the playground of Zhongbao High School, "You will drink wind here every day. I'll see what you can poop in 2 years." Without saying anything, Duanfang silently took the net bag from his stepfather and turned away. Looking at Duanfang's sharp back, Wang Cunliang felt much weird in his heart. Very tired, very sullen, wronged, and aggrieved. He could only curse in his stomach. A doggone boy. No one knows who he was cursing. Duanfang returned to Wang village with the bedding, wooden box, and sickles. It was already evening. This is an extremely clear dusk, and the western sky is burning with sunset clouds, which is gorgeous. The sky is very low. The sunset glow seems to be resting on the ground, and the soft sunset is like an egg yolk, very squeamish, and if it is poked, it will disperse. Duanfang returned home, but no one was at home, so Duanfang put down his belongings and took out the 2 sickles from the bedding. These were new ones that he bought in Zhongbao town. Duanfang took off his coat, squatted on the patio, and sharpened the 2 sickles. He sharpened the blades of the 2 sickles as insistent as Sis Hongfen's mouth. He tried its sharpness with his thumb. The blade sounded like a moving singing. Duanfang woke up early the next day. No one knows what time it was, but it was not bright anyway. Mother has gotten up and has made breakfast in advance. Breakfast is not porridge, but dry rice. Dry rice cooked with glutinous rice. Too luxurious. Duanfang thought his mother specially prepared this for him, but it was not. Cutting wheat is a laborious job. Having porridge will definitely not work. It will be gone after a few times of urine. Only dry rice can withstand it. However, when harvesting the wheat, when the grain and yellow are not connected, every household has no rice. People knowing living always leave some glutinous rice during the new year and then take it out at this time. It's the so-called that good stew needs to be used on blaze. As soon as the wheat leaves the ground, the days will naturally be linked. It's the same every year. It's just that Duanfang was still young before, and he didn't woke up so early, so he didn't know. The glutinous rice was on the table. Father, Mother, Hongfen, and Duanfang sat down on the four sides of the table, facing a small oil lamp. Four mouths kept chirping. With pickles, Duanfang pushed down 2 large bowls in one go and had 2 very loud burps at the small oil lamp. Duanfang wiped his mouth, tied the straw sandals, and took a small earthen jar from his mother's hand, which was just boiled water. Duanfang held the earthen jar in one hand and the sickles in the other. He followed his father, Hongfen followed Duanfang, and his mother followed Hongfen. Father opened the door, and with the darkness outside, they went to work. The laborers of the production team gathered together at the back door of the captain's house. They were silent and walked into the farm together. There is still a hint of cold in the wind, but the key is that the dew is too heavy and is wet everywhere. The roosters in the village began to be lively, one after another. The sky was also bright, and when arrived at the wheat farms, the east side already emerged white, with a few traces of red. It was the kind of appearance that could erupt at any time. No one spoke. No one knew when they started to work. It just started anyway. Duanfang put the sickle in his hand and turned it twice and jumped into the wheat farm first, a bit scrambling. The sickle is very light in Duanfang's hand, as Duanfang has strength. When he was in Zhongbao town, he could lift a load of 190 pounds of stone above his head. A small sickle was nothing. After the time of meal, the sun flickered twice and jumped out. The fresh sun is like a transparent iron block burnt on a blacksmith anvil. Under the hammer strike, all the light is gushing out. The ground is bright abruptly. Duanfang took the lead in the wheat farms and had already thrown his stepfather out a lot. Duanfang did it deliberately. He wanted to let his stepfather see if he was a soft egg who could only eat but not poop. Duanfang's movements were still a bit jerky at first, but later he got better and became more and more agile, with mechanical smoothness that can be repeated endlessly, and he couldn't stop even he wanted to. Because of his agility, his pride burst out. He took off his coat and smashed it to the ground. There was sweat all over his back. The rising sun illuminates Duanfang's back. His back is oily and shiny, and there is a deep groove in the middle. This is a young back, a muscular back, open, thick, and with a clear line. It draws back at the waist. There it was taken in very forcefully. However, Wang Cunliang's hands and feet were leisurely and not busy. At the time of gasping, he glanced at Duanfang lightly in the front and sighed in his heart. "You daredevil, how is this working? It's just like pooping, with the hard things in the front. How come your cutting wheat is like this? It's an endurance job, so you have to take a little longer. How can you put all your strength in the forefront? The most important thing for farmers is to soak their bodies in sweat, salt them, and marinate them into bacon. This is hard to earn, and this is chewy. What's the use of fresh meat? It's soft and can only be roasted with tofu. With fine skin and tender flesh, you dare to lead and fight shirtless. You seek it. Is it possible to cut wheat to be shirtless? With so many wheat horns poking on your body, won't itch to death, and won't it hurt you to death?" Wang Cunliang planned to remind Duanfang, but did not, while seeing that he is showing off badly. Without suffering enough, he never knows how fresh meat turns into bacon. He will know when he gets married in the future. Doing anything is like going to bed with a woman. If coming up brutally, it will be solved extremely quickly. Why do people say that no lightness in a long journey? Needless to say, young man's ears can be stopped with others' tongues anyway. Let him go. Let him go rashly. By next year, he would not be so sassy. When he eats buns, he will know where to bite first. Your arms are thick. What's the use of thick arms? Thick arms do rough work, but thin arms do fine work. The lunch was on the ridge. It was flour soup. At noon the sun had hung above the heads and was particularly vigorous, and the wheat awns bloomed on Duanfang's skin and began to tease people, itching strangely and pricking into the flesh. Duanfang's skin seemed to have been stripped, turned over, and the pores were enlarged, red. It hurt when scratching and sunburning. If only there were a place to avoid the harsh sun. However, farmers have nowhere to hide. You can become an earthworm if you can. Duanfang's discomfort has another aspect, which is the waist. Duanfang has strength, but his small waist is indifferent. It is sore and distended. It's uncomfortable to bend, it's uncomfortable to stand up, and it's uncomfortable to sit down. Duanfang dragged a wheat bundle, placed it under his waist arch, and lay on it, feeling comfortable. Only for a while it became more uncomfortable. It must be because he was too full just now. His waist was relaxed, but his stomach was too full to deal with it. So he could only stand up again, sitting and laying restlessly. Wang Cunliang only ate half full, put the remaining half on the ridge, and lit the dry tobacco pot. Duanfang was not far away from him, tossing there. Wang Cunliang didn't look at him. Wang Cunliang was at the earthen jar, picking the dry tobacco pot, and squinted. With sweat beads hanging on his forehead, he took a sip, took a smoke, and took a smoke, took a sip, thinking about nothing, like enjoying a blessing. The smoke is really a good thing. Inhale it deeply, then breathe it out for a long time, and groan, and all the tiredness sighs with that breath. For smokers, relieving greed is only the second. The most important role is to take a breath. Non-smokers can't realize this. There is a cigarette dangling in the mouth, clattering, and slowly breath is taken. Otherwise, there is always one thing that has not been done, and the heart is empty. Without hope, people will be anxious. Cunliang looked at Duanfang from a distance. If he were a brother, he might pass the dry tobacco pot to Duanfang's hand. But Duanfang was his son after all, and Wang Cunliang couldn't. After all, cigarettes are still a bad thing. With breathing in and out, the money will turn into cigarettes. If Duanfang wants to smoke, wait until he marries and leaves the family. I have provided him for high school, but not smoking. There is no such rule. When cutting the wheat, Shen Cuizhen and Duanfang were far apart. Generally speaking, if no special circumstances, Duanfang is far away from his mother and talk less. Duanfang is very polite to everyone, but not to his mother, so he speaks eloquently. No matter how smoothly they are, they must be pulled out of their mouth sideways. Also very concise. Got it. Don't be fuzzy. Annoying. And so on. That's all about speaking, and it becomes a stick when it's concise, and it's breathtaking. Alas, that's the case for boys. Once they reach their age, they learn to give their mothers prestige. No wonder it says that daughters are good. When she becomes a mother herself, she will love her mother when she loves her children, and a daughter becomes a little padded jacket for her mother. The boy's arms are thick, the thighs are thick, and his throat is thick, and his heart must be thick with them. All the same, think about it, there is more or less resentment. It would be great if Duanfang were a daughter. Shen Cuizhen had not given birth to a daughter in her life, so she would not have that blessing. If Duanfang were a woman, Hongfen would dare not be so arrogant. Daughters have no other skills, but witch mouth is not a machine gun. In the afternoon, Duanfang had a lot of blisters on his hand. At first they were blisters, but then they turned into blood blisters. Duanfang has practiced the stone chains and stone weights for 2 years, and his palms are full of calluses. Unexpectedly, his palm still couldn't hold it. At this time, Duanfang realized that he had miscalculated and should not have used the newly bought sickle. The handle of the new sickle is always not as good as the old one because it is very rough. After midday, Duanfang could no longer be as vigorous as in the morning, and he became slow. Duanfang wanted to stop and lay down on the ridge to take a good rest. He turned around and saw his father. Wang Cunliang was just behind, and he was almost rushing up. He looked slow, but not slow at all. There was no expression on Wang Cunliang's face, and no mood could be seen. Duanfang was decisive, and he held the sickle extremely tightly. The last strength of Duanfang continued until dark. Fortunately, it was dark, or Duanfang could not exert any strength, and Duanfang's blood blisters were broken. After only a day's work, the palm was completely rotten. He used his left hand for dinner, so he could only use his left hand to hold chopsticks. The pain in his right hand was so severe that the flesh inside could be seen. Duanfang kept hiding his right hand under the table. He didn't want to put it on the table, as he couldn't lose his face in front of Wang Cunliang. None of this escaped the mother's eyes. This time, Shen Cuizhen couldn't care about Duanfang in return. She also cut wheat for a day, and her waist was also about to break. She still had to cook when she returned home. Who made you a farmer? The farmers must survive in these places. You men, sooner or later, will experience this by yourself. Duanfang was not sleeping this night, but was actually dead. He didn't even shower before he could lay down, and before his head could find a pillow, he fell asleep. He was like a rock sinking into the bottom of a well. This time was also extremely short, and after a while there was sounds of movement in the hall. This means that a new day has begun again. Duanfang wanted to turn over but couldn't move. He struggled to move, but it hurt no matter where he moved. The whole figure was like a bucket with exploded hoops fallen apart. Duanfang wanted to get up, couldn't. At this time, the stepfather coughed dryly on the patio, and Duanfang could hear that he was urging him. Duanfang said to himself, "One more minute of sleep, just 1 minute. 1 minute is also good." But Wang Cunliang had already coughed for the second time, and he had to get up. The Duanfang that returned to the wheat farm was no longer the Duanfang of yesterday, and the flesh on his body was rusty as if soaked in a vinegar jar. The point is that the ambition in his heart was vented. Before going out, Duanfang brought a long strip of cloth. He had already wrapped his hand a few times on the way to work, and the pain in his hand was better. But Duanfang ignored one of the most important details. He was lazy last night and forgot to sharpen his sickle. Knife sharpening does not mistaken chop woodwork. It's really a famous saying. The sickle was blunt, killing Duanfang. The wheat in the early morning is different from usual. Typically, under the sun, the wheat stalks are crispy and crunchy under the sun, done as soon as you go down. The dew is heavy at this moment. The wheat straw is particularly astringent, and it has incredible toughness, which is quite annoying. Yesterday early in the morning, Duanfang was in a good mood. He was full of energy and didn't pay attention, so didn't feel it. Now good. The sickle is blunt, the palm is torn, the body is rusted, and Duanfang is particularly reluctant. But when people are in a reluctant situation, they are inevitably like a donkey. Duanfang exerted his strength and yanked with a shoop, but the tip of the sickle stuck by something. After pulling it, he found that it had been pulled from his calf. A warm current rushed into the instep. Duanfang didn't shout, put down the sickle, and hurriedly covered it. How can blood be covered? Like a loach, it slips through your fingers with a slide. The pain came up at this time, and it was very fierce when it came up. He couldn't hold it, but only breathe into it. Wang Dagui, who was not far away, heard the movement. He walked over and pulled Duanfang's hand, which was all wet, put it down, and rubbed his fingers, which were very slippery. Got it, it's blood. Dagui shouted loudly in the misty morning light, Cun Liang, Cun Liang! Dagui and Cun Liang carried Duanfang to the cooperative medical service, and it was dawn. The barefoot doctor Wang Xinglong just got up. Xinglong washed Duanfang's wound with hydrogen peroxide. As soon as the hydrogen peroxide touched the wound, a vigorous foam appeared like a crab exhaling. The blood hasn't stopped yet and gurgles out silently. Xinglong was sleepy, holding tweezers with his pinky pointing there, looking a bit like a handy woman. Xinglong commented on Duanfang's injury slowly, saying, It's quite big, it's deep, and it's time to get needles and threads. Wang Cunliang said, Is there any bone issue? Xinglong said, Nope, the wound is quite big and quite deep. Duanfang said hurriedly, Use alcohol for disinfection first. Xinglong said, Bullshit. You think it's just scratched? How can you use alcohol for such a deep wound without it hurting you? Duanfang was a little stubborn and said, Use alcohol for disinfection. It will get better soon. Xinglong went to fire the alcohol stove for boiling the needles and threads. Using this gap, Duanfang untied the bandage, took the alcohol cotton wool, and poured all the cotton wool on his palm, squeezed to the wound, and the alcohol was squeezed out and dripped onto the wound. Duanfang arched his waist, took a breath, and opened his mouth desperately. The wound on the cuff was on fire, and the fire was scorching. Duanfang didn't see the flame, but the fire was raging. Xinglong gave Duanfang 6 stitches. As soon as he put on the bandage, he returned to the wheat farms. The bandage on the cuff is very eye-catching, radiating a dazzling bright white light under the shining of the sun. A bit stunning. And there's still a large piece of red in the middle. As soon as Duanfang returned to the ridge, he grabbed his sickle. He wanted to race against the time. Wang Cunliang said angrily, Stop. Duanfang ignored him and continued walking into the wheat farms. Wang Cunliang raised his voice with a key and said, You can, only you can. Duanfang heard it. This was to persuade him. He stopped insisting, returned to the ridge, closed his eyes, and lay down. Duanfang noticed that there were 2 suns at this moment, both on his body. One was on his eyelids, and the other was on his cuff. The pain is the sun's rays, radiant everywhere and radiant endlessly. Although it hurt, Duanfang fell asleep quickly. When he woke up, it was lunch again. A large number of men and women leaned against the ridge and rested. Everyone was making a lot of noise, shouting about backaches, leg pains. Everyone was grinning, and it started talking and laughing. This is the happiest moment of labor, and of course it is short. Because it is hard to come by, it is extremely precious. The men and women were free, but their mouths became busy. Talking about it is outrageous. In fact, it is not outrageous, and that is actually an inevitable topic for them. It's about men and women. It's to tits, it's into crotches, it's in bed. Their bodies don't seem to be sore anymore, and the more they talk, the more energetic they are. And the more they talk, the more ambitious they are. They are experienced. As long as they persist, they must be waiting for them in the near future. While they were eating and talking with his words and your words, like mouse-to-mouse mating, going in and out, very smooth and happy. There was a dissolute laugh from the ridge, perhaps a little bit nasty. The things in bed are really gratifying. It is a joy to do and a joy to talk about. It is simple and fascinating, and it is most likely to become a joke on the farms. Guanlis is a master at this. She is the mother of 4 children. She doesn't lack a tooth. The mouthful of teeth just can't control her tongue. Good words can be said naked by her, sticking tits and butt. One mealtime can be full of children and grandchildren. Guanlis is also a swift person, holding the rice bowl, picking up quickly, chewing quickly, stretching her neck, and swallowing more quickly. Putting down the bowl, Guanli started to make fun of the captain. In Guixiang's mouth, the captain is a male cat in March or a male dog in March. He is hoarse and jumps up and down, just like when the captain is working. She is standing there. At the bedside, I heard it all, saw it all. The captain was very calm and didn't panic. His mouth certainly didn't forgive her, and in turn make fun of Guanlis. The captain talked the body of Guanlis rattled, and the body of Guanlis particularly coquettish. After finishing talking about the Guanlis, the captain concluded, "Women, that's it. Awesome. 30 is like a wolf. 40 is like a tiger, sucking the wind as a stander, sucking the soil as a sitter. Guanlis, both wind and soil are sucked away by you. You are not easy, you." Everyone laughed wildly. Guanlis was laughed at by others, but was not angry or anxious. She stood up slowly and left, going around in a big circle, around behind the captain, taking advantage of the captain's unpreparedness, knocked down the captain from behind. Guanlis ensured having contacted the women with her eyes first and established a temporary and secret united front. So, there is a united will and a united action. The united front has invincible strength and can be said to be unconquerable. 4 or 5 women rushed up together, grabbed the captain's hands and feet, and gave the captain a hanging and drawing. The captain's mouth was stiff, smiled, and continued to make fun of them. "Don't be like this. Don't jeer. One by one. I end you guys. One by one." The captain's words caused a scream, and his words stirred up light and happy public anger. The public was outrageous. The heroines of the women were coming up. They were going crazy and dissolute. They gathered around the captain, quickly took off the captain's long pants, and quickly took off the captain's shorts. The captain was ashamed. How has the thing in the crowd seen such a big world? No, it is drooping, tilting its head, and it can be said to have no place for itself. Guanlis shrieked, "Let's look at the mushroom! Come and see the captain's wild mushroom!" The captain was anxious, but his arms and legs were dragged by the women. His body was hanging and couldn't move or cover. The captain's mushroom was soft, but his mouth was very stiff. Guanlis picked up an ear of wheat and flirted with the captain. What kind of mushroom can withstand the enlightenment of an ear of wheat? Unless you are wood, unless you are made of iron. There is an on the wheat. Soon the captain's mushroom came crazy with people, angry or happy. It stiff, became thicker and longer. It looked both stupefied and drunk. It's really stupid. The captain has nothing to do with it. It is disobedient, and the captain just can't deal with it. The captain, the comrade, is really interesting. When his mushroom is soft, his mouth is stiff. But now good, his mushroom is stiff and his mouth is soft. He started begging for mercy. Late. Who would listen to him in such a situation? The women laughed roughly, and the captain was thrown to the ground, alone. The men also laughed, coughing constantly, their faces flushed. No man went up to help the captain. Such a favor is not easy to do. After all, which man has not been teased by the women? No one helps anyone. No one dares. Anyone who helps will have to sell the mushroom naked. Although such things happen often, every time they're fresh, they're funny, they're happy, and they're relieved. However, besides playing and laughing, generations of farmers abide by such a rule. Such jokes are limited to men and women who have given birth to kids. One more point is even more important. It doesn't matter if the women touch men. It doesn't matter if they are out of line. But men cannot touch women. Absolutely not. The men touching the women wishes to eat tofu, and it is very nasty, not funny. Men can do the nasty thing. Many generations have followed such an unwritten rule. The women are making big jokes, and the unmarried girls are not far away, separated by about 7 or 8 feet, and did not evade. In fact, they still avoid it. They don't look at them at all. Everything in front of them has nothing to do with them. Although their ears don't know what was happening away, they don't listen to it, which means that nothing happened. There are still solemn faces and nervous faces. They certainly hear it, but it doesn't matter if you do. Who can prove it? The main reason is that you can make it look like you can hear it. Especially, you can make it look like you understand it. If you understand it, you're guilty. Therefore, generally speaking, no matter how girls are shy and they will not stand up and walk away. If you walk away, it means you understand, and instead get yourself into it. How can you understand? Very disgraceful and very dishonest. The girls gather together peacefully, saying what they are supposed to say. It's just that they all lower their heads and no one looks at other people's faces. In fact, they dare not to look. Their faces are all red. It's a kind of unreasonable flushing. I'm red, and you are red too. Everyone does not look at each other, which avoids embarrassment. It is the collective tacit understanding. Why are girls able to understand some details without the teacher when they get married? They all heard it during the intervals of work. They have understood it a long time ago after they have passed the door, have given birth to cubs, and have nursed their children. They have the right to get in as well as their predecessors. After all, this is not a big knowledge. Isn't it a thing in the crotch? Isn't it a thing in the crotch? Duanfang lay on the ridge, saying nothing. He pulled out a wild pea from the wheat farm, put the pea into his mouth, chewed it up, swallowed, and made a small whistle from the husk of the pea and put it in his mouth, slowly blowing a minor tune. Although Duanfang is also a male, he is not married after all, and it is not easy to mix with them. If unmarried virgins don't know how to be prudent at such times, they will have problems finding a wife in the future. Duanfang turned his head to look at them, then closed his eyes again. Fortunately, the pain in his cough is getting better now, and he can bear it. The laughs of the women were in his ears. They were so happy, they eventually had a huge bargain, and they went crazy with joy. Duanfang has seen so many laughs like so. Farmers are like this, doing 2 things in their lifetime. First, grow crops, and second, harvest crops. If farmers don't seek some fun for themselves, who would send the fun to your door and squeeze it in through the gap of the door? So, rely on yourself. Duanfang thought, within a few days, he will be like this too. Besides planting and harvesting, he can only cheer others up with his crotch or to cheer himself up with other people's crotches. That's all. What's the meaning of the 5 years in the elementary school? What's the meaning of the 2 years of middle school? What's the meaning of the 2 years in high school? It's better to lay on this soil from the beginning. Duanfang lay down, blowing a minor tune in his mouth. But in his heart there was a sudden fear of the soil under his back. There was hatred too. Soil is nothing else. Eventually it is just the soil, heartless, pressing your whole life on it until you finally become a piece of soil too. Duanfang suddenly heard the captain speak loudly, and the captain said angrily, "It's time to go to work, motherfuckers. Talk, Go to work." The joking voice suddenly quieted down, and the captain's tone of voice was full of injustice. The breath is taken back and forth, presumably tying his belt. The condolences performance ended. The quietness that came out of nowhere seemed to be an unexpected strike to Duanfang. Duanfang thought, "It seems that my entire life will be like this." A wave of frustration surged in Duanfang's heart, and a wave of unsuspecting despair hit his heart, feeling sad. The whistle in his mouth also stopped. Duanfang didn't open his eyes and suddenly heard his father's dry cough. Father coughed dryly again. Duanfang trembled. He remembered it. It was time to work. Duanfang sighed deeply. Go to work. Go to work.